I thought divorce would be the end of my nightmare. But my ex-wife had other plans. She weaponized the kids, drained my bank accounts, and dragged me through court just to watch me struggle. I tried to be fair. I even offered her a simple deal to keep things civil. She laughed in my face. That's when I realized, if she wanted war, I'd give her war. What I didn't expect was that her greed would hand me the perfect weapon, her 401k. When I first met my ex-wife, I thought she was everything I could ever want, driven, confident, and ambitious. We were young, and like most young couples, we thought we had the world figured out. She pushed me to leave my job when our first child was born, saying it made more sense for her to work while I stayed home. At the time, I believed her. She had a way of making everything sound logical, even when it left me at a disadvantage. I told myself it was for the good of our family. But over the years, her confidence turned into control. She handled every dollar that came into our home. My accounts were linked to hers. My name on the bills was more symbolic than practical. I was the parent at home, and she was the breadwinner. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. We were a team. But then came the little cracks, the dismissive comments, the way she made jokes at my expense in front of friends, how she rolled her eyes when I offered an opinion about finances. I started to feel more like an employee than a husband. When our second child was born, things only got worse. She worked longer hours, and her patience grew shorter. I began to notice strange phone calls, late nights, excuses that didn't add up. At first, I tried to brush it off. Parenting two kids is stressful, after all. But then I caught her texting someone late at night, smiling at the screen in a way she hadn't smiled at me in years. The truth hit me like a punch to the chest. She was having an affair. The betrayal would have been enough on its own. But it didn't stop there. Her words turned sharper, cutting deeper. She insulted me when the kids could hear. She mocked the fact that I hadn't made something of myself, as though staying home and raising our children was meaningless. The worst part was the day she snapped at our oldest, raising her hand like she was going to hit him. That was the breaking point. I told her to leave. And when the door shut behind her, I thought the storm had passed. I couldn't have been more wrong. The weeks that followed were chaos. She refused to give me a cent, even though she knew I had no income and no family support to fall back on. "The court hasn't ordered me to pay you a dime," she sneered when I begged her for help with groceries. She even lied to the bank to freeze my accounts. It wasn't enough for her to walk away. She wanted me to suffer. When I filed for divorce, she escalated. The verbal abuse spilled into the courtroom. She accused me of being lazy, of living off her. She twisted every sacrifice I'd made for our family into a weapon against me. It was humiliating to sit there and hear the life I'd built with her distorted into something shameful. But what she didn't count on was the judge finally stepping in. 6 months after I kicked her out, the court ordered her to pay child support and spousal support. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep us afloat. And in that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. If she wanted to fight dirty, I'd fight smarter. Little did I know, everything was about to change. The first time she refused to pay court-ordered support, I thought it was just another delay tactic. She had always been stubborn, always found a way to drag her feet when responsibility landed on her shoulders. But weeks turned into months, and the money never came. I was behind on rent, juggling late bills, stretching groceries until there was nothing left in the pantry but canned beans. I called her, trying to stay calm. "The kids need shoes. Their coats don't fit. Can you please just transfer the support?" She laughed. "The court order doesn't mean I owe you anything until it's enforced. Good luck feeding them until then." Her voice dripped with venom, like she enjoyed the thought of me scrambling. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking with rage. That should have been my first red flag. She didn't just want to separate from me. She wanted to see me crushed. When I went back to court, the judge finally forced garnishment through her paycheck. Watching her face when the order was read out was the first small victory I'd had in months. But by then, she was $6,000 behind. The court let me use that debt as leverage to relocate closer to my family. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a chance to rebuild. Still, every interaction with her was a war. She played games with visitation, tried to twist the kids against me, and showed up to exchanges with insults ready to fire. I kept my head down, telling myself that once the payment started, at least the financial bleeding would stop. But she wasn't done. A year after the divorce, I remarried. I checked the paperwork carefully, and there was a box on the spousal support section that said payments stop upon remarriage. Except in my case, the box wasn't checked. I figured it was fine, so when the support kept coming, I let it. I didn't file for my share of her retirement. Honestly, I thought it was a fair trade. Take a year of spousal support, about 12 grand, and leave the 401k alone. For a while, I thought maybe that was the end of it. She'd pay, I'd raise the kids, and eventually we'd both move on. But in 2017, out of nowhere, she filed for full custody. She marched into court claiming I was unfit, that my new wife was manipulating the kids, that our home wasn't stable. It blindsided me. For weeks, I lived in fear of losing the only thing that mattered. During those hearings, she found out I had remarried. That's when she realized she'd been paying spousal support during the first year of my new marriage. Her reaction was nuclear. She stormed out of the courtroom, screaming that I'd stolen from her. I tried to reason with her. I told her I hadn't filed for her retirement because I thought the support made us even. If you let me keep that year, I won't touch your 401k, I said. We can call it fair. She narrowed her eyes and hissed, "No, you're going to pay me back every cent." The judge ordered me to repay it. But here's the twist. He increased child support and deducted the repayment from that. She ended up paying herself back, while I got an extra $20 a month on top. As I walked out of court that day, a strange thought struck me. She had forced my hand. I gave her a chance to settle, to keep the retirement safe. She wanted blood instead. And that was the moment I knew. I was going after her 401k. After that custody stunt, something inside me shifted. I had been playing defense for years, just trying to survive each attack. But when she demanded repayment of the spousal support, even after I offered her a clean way out, it flipped a switch. She could have walked away with her retirement untouched. Instead, she chose to squeeze me for $12,000, knowing full well it would backfire in the long run. I started digging into the divorce paperwork more carefully. At night, after the kids went to bed, I'd sit at the kitchen table with a stack of files and highlight every clause. My new wife would bring me coffee, reminding me to take breaks, but I couldn't. I had to know exactly where I stood. That's when I noticed the section about retirement accounts. The wording was crystal clear. I was entitled to a portion of her 401k. I had skipped over it before because I thought the spousal support would balance things out. But now it looked like my ticket to justice. I remember staring at the page, my stomach tightening. The numbers weren't exact yet, but I knew she'd been at her job long enough to have a solid amount tucked away. If she'd just let me keep that 1 year of support, I never would have touched it. But since she'd forced repayment, all bets were off. I brought it up to her during one of our drop-offs. We stood in the parking lot outside a gas station, the kids already buckled in the back seat. I kept my voice calm. "You know, I gave you a choice. Spousal support or the retirement account. You made your decision." She sneered. "You wouldn't dare touch my retirement." I shrugged. "You'll see." The look on her face told me everything. She thought I was bluffing. That was her fatal mistake. From that moment on, I filed the paperwork to pursue the 401k split. The process was slow, painfully slow. Every step required her cooperation, and of course, she refused at every turn. She stalled, filed objections, even tried to move the case to another jurisdiction. It dragged out for years, each delay a reminder of just how far she'd go to keep me from what was legally mine. But here's the thing. The longer she resisted, the worse it looked for her. Judges don't like games. Every missed deadline, every baseless filing, added weight to my case. The court started slapping her with sanctions, small at first, then bigger. At one point, she was ordered to pay me $600 a month on top of child support as a penalty for her stonewalling. And still, she didn't stop. What I didn't realize then was how much she feared me touching that account. It wasn't just money to her, it was pride. It was proof that she had built something for herself while I wasted time raising our kids. To her, my claim on it was an attack on her identity. I told myself I was doing it for survival, for fairness. But the more I watched her unravel, the more I realized this fight had become something else. She thought she could bleed me dry. What she didn't see was that she was setting herself up for the biggest financial hit of her life. And I was ready to land it. The day I finally saw the numbers, I almost dropped the folder on the floor. I'd been bracing myself for months, maybe even years, wondering if pursuing her retirement account would be worth the endless hearings and paperwork. In my head, I had guessed it might be 12, maybe 15,000 at most. Enough to prove a point, sure, but not enough to change my life. But when the court-ordered statement arrived in the mail, the figures stared back at me like a punch to the chest. My share alone was nearly 4 times what she had fought to claw back from me in spousal support. For times, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the papers, my hands trembling. My wife leaned over my shoulder, reading silently. Finally, she whispered, "Are you seeing this right? That's huge." I nodded, still in shock. She could have walked away clean. She could have let me keep 12 grand and saved herself this. It was surreal. For years, I had been the one barely scraping by, stretching every dollar, stressing over groceries and rent. And here was proof that my stubborn ex had been sitting on a retirement fund that dwarfed everything she had accused me of stealing. The next hearing was brutal. She showed up in her usual armor, expensive blazer, folder clutched in her hands, chin tilted like she was the victim of some grand injustice. She tried to argue that I didn't deserve a cent, that I hadn't earned it because she was the one who went to work every day while I played house. I wanted to laugh, but instead I let my lawyer handle it. He calmly explained that the law didn't care about her narrative. Marriage is a partnership. I had supported her career by staying home with the kids, making her long hours possible. And under the court's own orders, I was entitled to half of the retirement contributions made during our marriage. The judge didn't even hesitate. Her objections were overruled. The order for disbursement was signed. I glanced at her across the courtroom. For the first time, she wasn't smirking. Her jaw was tight, her face pale, her hands trembling around her folder. That's when it hit me. She finally realized she had lost. All those years she had dragged me through hell. Every insult, every withheld payment, every attempt to paint me as a deadbeat dad. It had all been for nothing. In the end, she had handed me the very weapon that would cut her down. When we left the courthouse, she followed me into the hallway. Her voice was sharp, almost a hiss. "You think you've won? You've destroyed me. I hope you're proud of yourself." I looked her dead in the eye and said the words I'd been holding back for years. "No, you destroyed yourself. I just stopped letting you drag me with you." Her glare could have burned a hole straight through me. But for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt free. And I knew the real storm hadn't even started yet. I thought the fight over the retirement account was the peak of it all, that once the disbursement order was signed, she'd accept defeat and move on. But I underestimated her ability to dig herself deeper. She didn't just refuse to cooperate. She actively sabotaged the process. Every form that needed her signature somehow got lost. Deadlines slipped by because she forgot to respond. She filed meaningless objections, each one forcing another court date, another delay. At first, I thought it was desperation, but the longer it went on, the clearer it became. She wasn't just stalling. She wanted to make me suffer through the process, even if it cost her more in the end. I'll never forget the hearing when the judge finally lost patience. After her third baseless objection, he leaned forward, his voice like steel. "Ma'am, this is a legal obligation. Every delay is only increasing your liability. If you continue this behavior, you will be sanctioned." She didn't even blink. Instead, she muttered under her breath, "He doesn't deserve it." The judge slammed his gavel. "That's enough. You're in contempt." From that moment on, the consequences started to stack up. She was hit with sanctions that required her to pay me $600 a month, on top of child support, for an entire year. It was supposed to be a punishment for wasting the court's time. But for me, it felt like the universe was finally balancing the scales. Still, the delays dragged on. For years. 4 long, exhausting years of back and forth before the funds were finally released. By then, I had almost stopped believing it would happen. I told myself not to get too hopeful, that she'd find some last-minute loophole to pull the rug out from under me. But in May of 2021, the wire transfer hit my account. I stared at the balance, almost afraid to breathe. The number was real. The money was mine. And it was more than I ever dreamed. It wasn't just about the amount, though. It was about what it represented. For nearly a decade, she had painted me as a failure, as someone worthless without her paycheck. And now, because of her arrogance, her greed, and her refusal to compromise, I had walked away with a payout that made her rage burn hotter than ever. The irony was almost poetic. That summer, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had gotten engaged. Her fiancé was younger, full of energy, bragging about their plans for a big wedding. But by the time January rolled around, something had changed. She seemed stuck. Rumors swirled that the wedding was on hold, that he was hesitant because of financial complications. Then one night, I got the email. It wasn't from her. It was from him. And what he said stopped me cold. The subject line read, "You ruined everything." For a moment, I thought it was spam. But when I clicked it open, my chest tightened. The message wasn't from her. It was from her fiancé. His tone was equal parts fury and desperation. "She told me you cleaned out her retirement account. Do you realize what you've done? We were planning a life together, and now she's saying we can't move forward because you destroyed her savings. You've ruined our future. I hope you're proud of yourself." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. A dozen responses rushed to my lips, sarcasm, anger, mockery. But instead, I sat there in silence, letting the weight of it sink in. He thought I had destroyed her? He didn't understand that she had destroyed herself. For days, I debated whether to respond. Part of me wanted to fire back with every detail. The affair, the abuse, the years of withheld support, the contempt charges. I wanted to show him the mountain of evidence that proved she wasn't the victim, that she had orchestrated every disaster herself. But another part of me wondered if it was even worth it. He was in love, or at least, in whatever version of love she allowed him to believe in. Would he even listen? I spent sleepless nights going over it in my head. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw the courtroom, heard her voice dripping with contempt, felt the sting of being called worthless. There was a twisted satisfaction in knowing she had finally hit a wall. Yet, I couldn't shake the doubt. Was I going too far by responding at all? One evening, my wife found me at the table again, the glow of the laptop casting shadows across my face. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "You don't owe him an explanation," she said softly. "I know," I sighed. "But part of me wants to make sure he understands what he's signing up for. He thinks I stole from her. He doesn't realize she set the trap herself." My wife gave me a look, the kind that cut through my defenses. "Then tell him the truth. But do it without anger. Facts speak louder than rage." So I drafted my reply. Calm, measured, and brutally honest. I explained that I had given her an option years ago. Let me keep a single year of spousal support, or face the retirement split. She had chosen the latter. I reminded him that the court had sanctioned her repeatedly for dragging out the process. And then, I ended with the one piece of advice I knew would sting the most. If you really love her, protect yourself. Get a prenup. Otherwise, you might find yourself in my shoes one day, wondering how someone you trusted managed to turn love into a battlefield. I stared at the draft for a long time before hitting send. My hands shook, not from fear, but from release. For the first time, I wasn't reacting out of desperation. I was making a choice, deliberate, controlled, final. When the message left my outbox, I knew the game had changed. Not just for her, but for me. And deep down, I could feel the storm wasn't over yet. After I hit send, I told myself it was over. I had said my piece, laid out the facts, and drawn the line. For the first time in years, I felt like I had closed a door that had been left wide open. For a few weeks, the silence was almost disorienting. No angry calls. No new motions filed in court. No venomous emails from her lawyer filled with accusations. For the first time in a decade, I felt like I could breathe. I started focusing on my kids again, on being present instead of always waiting for the next legal ambush. We went to the park, had movie nights, even took a short road trip to visit my parents. My wife noticed the change too. She told me I was lighter, that I laughed more. For once, life felt almost normal. Then the email came. It was from her again, long, rambling, dripping with spite. She called me a thief, a con artist, a parasite who had fed off her hard work. She claimed I had manipulated the courts, twisted the law against her, ruined her chance at happiness. And then she wrote the line that made my blood run cold. "You may have won this battle, but I swear I'll find a way to make sure you regret ever crossing me." The rage I felt reading that was immediate and visceral. My hands shook as I scrolled down the screen. I had given her every opportunity to walk away. She could have kept her retirement intact. She could have remarried without baggage. Instead, she had chosen war. And now, even after the court had ruled, even after the money was gone, she still wanted more blood. I showed the email to my lawyer, half expecting him to laugh it off. Instead, his expression hardened. "She's threatening you. Keep this. Document everything. If she tries anything, we'll bury her with her own words." For a moment, I felt reassured. After all, What could she really do now? The court case was over, the retirement dispersed, the sanctions on record. Surely she was out of moves. But that was my mistake. Because people like her don't stop when they lose, they doubled down. And within weeks, the whispers began. Mutual acquaintances dropping hints that she was telling people I had stolen her life savings, that I was a liar who manipulated judges, that I wasn't fit to be a father. At first, I brushed it off as petty gossip. But then the kids came home from a weekend visit, repeating things she had said about me. Words that cut deeper than any legal fight ever had. That's when I realized this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And the false peace I had felt, it had just been the eye of the storm. The smear campaign spread faster than I imagined. At first, it was just whispers, neighbors avoiding eye contact, parents at school drop-off giving me tight, polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. But soon, it became clear she was actively poisoning the well. One afternoon, a colleague of my wife's pulled her aside and asked if everything was okay at home. When my wife pressed, the truth spilled out. My ex had been telling people I stole her retirement, that I was financially abusive, that I had manipulated the courts while she was the real victim. I wanted to scream. After everything she had done, after the affair, the years of withheld support, the contempt charges, she was now playing the part of the martyr. And the worst part? Some people were buying it. It got worse when the kids started repeating her words. Mom says you tricked the judge. Mom says you only won because she didn't have a good lawyer. Hearing those words out of their mouths felt like knives. I tried to explain gently, reminding them that court decisions aren't based on tricks, but on facts. But I could see the confusion in their eyes. She was twisting their view of me, drop by drop, like poison in water. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the ceiling, my chest tight. What if she wins? I whispered to my wife. Wins what? She asked. The narrative, I said. What if the kids grow up believing her version of things? What if I lose them, not to the court, but to her lies? My wife squeezed my hand. Then you fight back. Not with anger. With proof. With consistency. Kids see the truth eventually. But you have to survive the storm long enough for them to recognize it. Her words stuck with me. And she was right. I couldn't stoop to my ex's level. But I also couldn't let her rewrite history unchecked. So I began documenting everything. Every message, every slip-up, every contradictory statement she made. I printed out emails, saved voicemails, even recorded the kids when they innocently repeated her lies. I didn't want to use them against her, but I needed a record. If she ever tried to escalate in court again, I'd be ready. Then came the real twist. I found out through a mutual acquaintance, one of her old coworkers, that she hadn't told her fiancé the full story. According to him, she had painted herself as a victim of a greedy ex-husband who stole her future. But she left out the contempt charges, the sanctions, the fact that she had been ordered, repeatedly, to pay me additional support because of her refusal to cooperate. And when he started asking questions, when he pressed her for details, things got ugly between them. The next weekend, when the kids came back from her place, they casually mentioned something that made my stomach drop. Mom's not getting married anymore. They had a big fight. She said it's because of you. I froze. For a moment, I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or just sit there in disbelief. Because it wasn't me who ruined her engagement. It was her own lies, finally catching up with her. And I knew this was just the beginning of her unraveling. I thought watching her engagement collapse would feel like victory. Instead, it felt hollow. The kids came back from her house unsettled, repeating fragments of arguments they had overheard. Her shouting, him slamming doors, accusations flying through the walls. They didn't fully understand, but they carried the tension with them like invisible backpacks. One night, my youngest crawled into my bed, eyes wide, whispering, "Dad, is it true you stole Mom's money?" My chest tightened like a vice. "No," I said softly. "That's not true. But she cries and says you ruined everything," he murmured. I felt something inside me crack. All those years of court battles, sanctions, judgments, it didn't matter to them. What mattered was the story she told. And she was using their trust as her weapon. After he fell asleep, I sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, I questioned if I had done the right thing. Yes, I had fought back, defended myself, even won in court. But at what cost? My children were caught in the crossfire, confused and hurting. The guilt hit me harder than any insult she had ever thrown. Maybe I should have just let her keep the money. Maybe I should have walked away, swallowed the injustice, and spared my kids the fallout. The thought of them doubting me, that was worse than poverty, worse than humiliation. The next day, I nearly called my lawyer to ask if there was any way to undo the disbursement, to return the money just to end the nightmare. My finger hovered over the phone, shaking. That's how broken I was, ready to give back years of suffering just to stop the bleeding. But then I remembered the nights with no food in the fridge. The months I begged her to contribute, and she laughed in my face. The court orders she ignored. The contempt charges. The way she had sneered when I asked for fairness. I hadn't stolen a dime. I had fought for what was legally and morally mine. And giving it back wouldn't stop her lies. It would only prove to her that her tactics worked. That realization steadied me. But it didn't erase the darkness. The smear campaign wore me down. Friends I'd known for years grew distant. Some believed her story. Others were just tired of the drama. And every time I looked into my kids' eyes, I saw the confusion she had planted there. I reached my lowest point that spring. Sitting alone in the car outside my house, engine off, silence pressing in, I felt like I had nothing left. My chest was heavy, my hands numb. For a terrifying moment, I wondered if maybe she had finally won. Not in court, not financially, but in spirit. And then, in that silence, a thought cut through. I can't give her that victory. If I let her break me, she wouldn't just have ruined my finances or my reputation. She would have ruined my children's father. I took a deep breath, gripped the steering wheel, and made myself a promise. This wasn't the end. I was going to fight, not for money, not for revenge, but for the truth. And the truth was about to come out in a way she couldn't spin. It happened during what was supposed to be a routine custody hearing. I walked into the courtroom with my binder of documents, expecting another drawn-out argument about visitation schedules. But my lawyer leaned in as we sat down and whispered, "She's made a mistake. A big one." I didn't understand at first. But then her lawyer stood up and began spinning the same tired narrative. How I had stolen her retirement, how I manipulated the system, how I had destroyed her life. It was nothing new, except this time, she slipped. She went off script, her voice rising, emotions spilling out. He tricked me. He threatened me. He said if I didn't give him support, he'd take my retirement. My lawyer calmly opened our folder. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to submit Exhibit 42, a series of emails from the petitioner to my client, dated 2017. The judge adjusted his glasses. My heart hammered as he read silently. Then he looked up, his expression hard. "These emails show that Mr. Name offered you a choice. Allow him to keep the year of spousal support, or he would pursue his share of the retirement. You refused, and he proceeded through legal channels. That is not coercion, that is negotiation. You were not tricked. You were informed." The silence that followed was deafening. Her face drained of color. She stammered, But that's not." The judge cut her off. "Enough. You have wasted this court's time with false accusations for years. You've ignored orders, stalled proceedings, and smeared the respondent publicly. I will not tolerate it any longer." Then came the words that felt like thunder in my chest. "You are hereby ordered to cease all disparagement of the respondent, both publicly and privately. Any further attempts to undermine his parental rights will be considered contempt, with penalties up to and including jail time." I couldn't breathe. For nearly a decade, I had lived under her shadow, accused, insulted, dragged through courtrooms like a criminal. And now, in front of everyone, the mask had finally slipped. The court saw her for what she was. She glared at me across the room, her mouth trembling with rage. But there was nothing she could do. The judge's gavel had sealed it. When we walked out into the hallway, she stormed up to me, eyes blazing. "You think you've won? You'll never really win. I'll make sure of it." For the first time, I didn't flinch. I looked her in the eye and said, "No, you already lost. And the only person you have to blame is yourself." She froze. For once, there was no comeback, no venom, just silence. That was the moment I knew the war was finally over. Not because she surrendered, but because the truth had finally crushed every lie she had built. And I walked out of that courthouse with my head high, knowing my kids would one day see who their father really was. Not the villain she invented, but the man who refused to break. Walking out of that courthouse felt like stepping into sunlight after years of storm clouds. For the first time in nearly a decade, I wasn't bracing for the next attack, the next letter from her lawyer, the next lie whispered into my children's ears. The order was clear: no more disparagement, no more games. If she crossed that line again, it wouldn't be me in trouble, it would be her. The money from her 401k sat in my account like a monument to everything I had endured. It wasn't just dollars, it was validation. Proof that I hadn't wasted my life raising my kids. Proof that marriage is a partnership. Proof that her version of events was nothing more than smoke and mirrors. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was standing in front of my children and knowing, without hesitation, that I had fought for them, not just in the courts, but in the truth. They may have believed some of her lies at first, but kids grow up. They see who shows up for them. They see who keeps promises and who breaks them. And I made sure that no matter what poison she tried to pour into their ears, I was there, steady, consistent, unshaken. Do I regret pursuing her retirement? No. She left me no choice. If she had accepted my original offer, she would have kept it all. But she wanted to bleed me dry, humiliate me, prove she could destroy me. Instead, she destroyed herself. Her engagement never recovered. From what I've heard, her fiancé walked away after realizing how deep her lies ran. She blamed me, of course, but I don't carry that weight. Actions have consequences, and she finally faced hers. I won't pretend the scars are gone. The years of fighting took their toll. I still wake up sometimes expecting a new email, a new summons, a new attack. But then I look at my wife, at my kids, at the quiet stability we've built, and I remind myself, the war is over, and the truth won. If you've made it this far, thank you for sticking with me through every twist and turn. This story wasn't just about money, or even revenge. It was about survival. About standing up when someone tries to break you, and refusing to let their lies define who you are. If you've ever been through a toxic breakup, a divorce, or a custody battle, you know how draining it can be. You question yourself, you doubt your worth, and sometimes you wonder if it's even worth the fight. But I'm here to tell you it is. Because the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how many lies are piled on top of it. I hope my story reminds you that you're not alone, and that sometimes, karma needs a little push from the courts. If this story hit home for you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Drop a comment below. Have you ever seen someone's greed backfire like this? I'd love to hear your take. And remember, stay strong, stay steady, and never let someone else write your story for you.